first session. Thank you for registering for the SSN Sustainable Lunchtime Bytes. So I hope you appreciated our little joke there with the Bytes. We were amusing ourselves anyway. On behalf of the SSN, I'd like to acknowledge and pay respects to the Yugambeh, Coombe and Bundjalung people of the Gold Coast region, past, present, and of course emerging. The SSN recognises strong connections of Indigenous people to the country of their ancestors, and we value all that Indigenous elders have to teach us about how to live sustainably and walk on this land. And we recognise Indigenous people as the true custodians of the land upon which we meet today. So to start the year, we thought it would be fabulous to just have some really short little information sessions where you can ask some questions, but we'll provide you with some information. We don't want to take up too much of your time. I know the start of the school year is always incredibly busy, but while you're having a bite to eat, we just thought we could have this little gathering to start the year off, so you can connect in from your location, no need to travel, and yeah, hopefully this will help you kick off your programs. Our first session is exploring ways of thinking about education for sustainability to easily and authentically incorporate it into your daily practice. Of course, it's Dr. Alison Sammel who's presenting this from Griffith University School of Education. Dr. Ali is also one of the SSN's esteemed board members, and I know no one better to speak to you about EFS than Dr. Ali. So I could tell you a lot more about her, but as I've just said, time is short, and I know you're eager to hear from her, so I'm going to hand you over. Take it away.
Thank you. Thanks. First of all, hi everybody. Can everybody hear me? And you can see the screen that has the title on it. Everybody's good? Fantastic. We can use the chat box too. So at some point I'll be asking questions, and if you want to fill in using the chat bar, that would be fantastic, because that way I can see you. I know Katie will have a look at that as well, and also sort of yell out a few things for me. So thank you, Katie. So firstly, thank you very much for coming. I was thinking about what I could talk to you about, and I think that for me, there's some, a lot of people have these overwhelming ideas of what sustainability or sustainability education is, and it seems so massive that you actually can't do it because you don't know where to go, and it's too confronting and overwhelming. So I just thought I'd bring it down to some basic things that I personally reflect on as a teacher, that I use when I sort of teach. So they're the things that I'm going to be talking about today. So first off, and again, if you don't mind, we might hold back questions till the end, and we will allow time for that because I'd really love to hear what you say. Okay, so if everybody doesn't mind, we'll just sort of, I'll do a bit of an alley rant for a little bit. So teaching sustainability for me, the core of it is really about unlearning. And so I think part of what I'm talking about there is that, you know, we've all grown up in a world that's basically very unsustainable. You know, for the past 200 years, where everything's been set up to create this situation that we've found ourselves in. So for me, teaching sustainability and teaching and learning sustainability is all about how do we collectively and individually unlearn. And that's a very difficult thing to do. So, but that for me is probably one of the biggest things. So what do I mean by that? And so again, we didn't come out of the womb having these ideas about society and the assumptions of society. They've been taught to us, right? They've been given to us. And so we think they're natural and normal or commonplace, but they're just an indoctrination, one way of perceiving the world, just like so many other ways of perceiving the world. There's no truth in it. It's just sort of what we're culturally conditioned to believe. Now, again, I'm speaking with the converted here, so I'm sure that, you know, I'm sorry if I'm going over things, but I thought that we'll start off on the same page and throw it out there. So one of the things that we really need to sort of think about is our everyday practices, our everyday knowledge. And that's hard because everything we've ever known is based around that knowledge, and our brain has wired itself and you know, put together the ways we think and the words we use, the assumptions that we make, all those type of things. And to try and really chip away at that and unlearn is quite a difficult thing. Our pedagogies, the way we teach, absolutely, we have to unlearn those. If you look at the history of education, it was only to socially indoctrinate kids into the way of which the ruling class wanted them to have certain behaviour, knowledge, skills, capacities, things like that. It was never to dispute the rule in class or to challenge it. It was always to go along with it. So that's a really interesting thing. If we're going to look at sustainability, we actually have to think about and unlearn some of the pedagogies that have got a PhD in it. I mean, how do you turn around and try to unlearn and play with that? So they're some of the things that we need to sort of look at. The content that we teach our kids, we have to really look at how we sift through all of that and find the places in which, you know, we can explore some new ways of understanding and new ways of actually asking questions to our students. The key thing for me, though, is if we're looking at teaching on sustainability, a lot of it comes down to not necessarily the head thinking, it's the embodied. I mean, our school system is built around that we almost decapitate kids and you focus on their head and whatever their bodily experiences are or their emotions or feelings or sensory things, we don't really want to have too much to do with that in the classroom, right? So, you know, we really disconnect that from everyday pedagogy. And if we're looking at teaching for sustainability, you actually need to really deeply engage with the emotive, right? You need to actually get the kids to actually jump into their senses and use those senses to actually inform what they're learning and marry those two things. And so one of the key things that I'll be talking about today are just some basic things that we can do around mainly this. So it's looking at how we treat and interact with ourselves, first of all, others, and then the environment, right? So I'll be focusing on those things as we go through them. One of the things that I do want to say too is when we actually look at unlearning, there are, as I said, everything we need to actually try to break apart. What we do know is that learning is actually difficult, even though, especially in when you talk about education, people think that you need to promote fun. You make it fun, make it engaging, make it edutainment, and the kids will learn. Well, we all know that deep learning comes at a pretty big cost to all of us. When you're deeply learning something, you have to shatter and completely crack through the foundational knowledge that you have to actually let the new light of learning and the new things that you're learning bubble through. If we're just plastering over something, it's not going to work. So deep learning, where you actually do paradigm shifting, will put you into a place of discomfort. It always has to, right? And so the thing is that we don't do well in formal education systems of putting kids into discomfort. In fact, we don't want that at all. But to teach about sustainability, we actually need to put kids into discomfort and ourselves and actually be comfortable with that discomfort. And I'll talk about that in more more detail in another slide. But one of the things I mean about that is looking at how we use the word environment. So what I'd love you to do in the chat bar, when I say the word environment, could you write down what are some of the words just come into your head? There's no right or wrong. Just pop down. I don't know if I can actually see it, Katie, so you might have to think about it. So if you want to write down some of the words that you think of when you think of the word environment. Again, I'm going to have such a smart group here that, you know what, it's I think you guys are all switched on.
Can you see it? There's things like nature, peace, backyard, surroundings, trees, habitat, biodiversity, interaction, place and space.
Lovely.
Lots of words.
Okay, so that's fantastic. So I want you to hold that, and then I want you to juxtaposition that against with what I'm saying here. So when we actually think about the word environment, I would find most people, so this is what we're talking about, the unlearning. Most people would turn around and talk about nature. And so we actually use that word interchangeably. When we say the environment, we always just seem to mean the natural environment. So when we're talking about education for sustainability or sustainability education, there's three aspects to it. You've got the individual environment, you've got the social environment, and you've got the natural environment. And all those three have to go together. What I mean by this is, now I've got a note there, this is human-centric. I have my elderly poodle on my lap, as you do, and Poppy would have a different understanding of his making sense of the world around him. But so we're going with the human-centered one. I thought that might be best for today. So if we look at the individual environment, so let's have a look at, say, think about a student in your classroom. You can see those kids who probably aren't very happy within themselves. They're hard on themselves. They're not usually the happiest of kids. You can see the anger that's in them. Now, those kids, and again, I'm stereotyping and doing some generalizations here, but bear with me. So the kids who I've found that sort of are pretty, they've got their grumpy pants on most of the time, they're actually sort of pretty angry, you will find that they have a harder time being pleasant, or they find that it's very hard for them to forgive themselves or show kindness or compassion to themselves. They get very angry around things, especially perfectionist tendencies, things like that. So it's very hard for them to then socially engage and show kindness, compassion, things like that, because the brain neuroplasticity has been, what we've seen in that space of science is that the pathways have developed that don't really allow their first default when somebody else makes a mistake or when somebody else does something to actually offer them compassion, forgiveness, kindness. And so their brain pathways and neural networks are set up, and so they feel that's the anger. So how they are as a person, their internal mental landscape will affect how they interrelate with socially. That will also affect how they interact with the natural environment. So let's have a look at this. Let me put these ones together so you can see it in play. So again, the human and the individual environment is really important. If you've got a kid who doesn't like stuff, you know, and they pick on things a lot, they've got that bullying tendency, the chances are they're not going to be the nicest kid in the playground. And they're the ones who are going to rip off the leaf as they go by. They don't have that social compassion, and they don't have that ecological compassion. And, you know, and that's the thing, you've got to really sort of look at how the individual environment relates to the social and natural. And that's where school systems play a role, because we can, to some extent, influence the individual environment more than anything in how we actually model and treat and demonstrate and cultivate education practices on a daily way. So you can see here how the individual environment will affect the social affects the environment. Now, I don't know if I've got a pen here. Oh, annotate. Oh, can I do this? Ooh, lovely. So you can see that these two interlink here. So you've got, now this is not a good diagram, not a good picture, but you can see that these two relate to everything. So how the individual feels about themselves will affect how they relate to the social environment, and also how they relate to the natural environment. And how we teach kids to make sense of the natural environment also has an impact on the natural environment, and also has an impact on how they perceive that what is normal and natural to actually relate to the environment. So you can see that when we're talking about environmental, any type of sustainability of education, in your mind, when you're thinking about it, you need to sort of think, okay, how could I relate? How can I sort of look at the individual environment in the means of the mental landscape of the kid? How can I look at what we're teaching as a society, and then sort of have a look at how that actually relates to and plays out, the assumptions and things like that play out to the natural environment. So they're all very connected. In fact, you will see that I probably say the individual and the social environment are more important. And let's actually have a look at that in a bit more detail. Oh, I've got to turn off this guy before I can move forward. Okay, does this move forward? Ah, there we are. Okay, so it's not just me who thinks this. So if we're actually looking at this, you can see in the center of the circle, hope everybody can see it. So we're looking at people when we talk about the impact of climate change. And so when we talk about climate change in schools, a lot of the time we just focus on the natural environment. And unless you're a geography teacher, shout out to you, Erin. And you can sort of see that you've got the rising temperatures, you've got the weather, you've got rising sea levels, and you've got the increase in CO2. So if we actually look at sort of, and so we teach a lot about only on the natural environment, we'd be talking about this inner circle. Let's have a look at the rising temperatures. They're going to bring severe weather. And so with that, we're actually starting to link them. We bring this out, and you can see that severe weather is going to cause effects in the social environment. And again, you can really see that if you look at the 2020 fires, right? How that was a huge thing in society, and the injuries, the impact, the mental health of the individual was being when we're talking about environmental stuff, it's not just the natural environment. And it's important as a teacher to really remember that and play on it. Otherwise, our kids will just get the assumption when we talk about the environment that it's only nature and not to see how it relates. Now, if we're looking at how it relates, it all actually, so the natural, the social, and the environmental, the natural environment, the individual, the natural, and the social all come together. And you can see how this plays out in the sustainability goals. Now, this is a worldwide call to actually see what we can do to actually promote a ecologically sustainable lifestyle. Now, I'm not going to debate whether they're good or bad. You know, I think that they probably have a role to play, but there's such a strong thing. Our government is really, we'll be seeing how we're going to be audited by these more and more as a country, and how countries audit each other with the Sustainable Development Goals. By the way, if you want to advance your career, start to specialize in these within your school. Because again, as I said, in the next 10 years, how your school is meeting these is a really big thing. Be the leaders in this, and you will find that that's the big thing that's coming up. Now, the question that people ask me then is, you can see how it actually relates to the social, the individual, and the natural. It's not just the natural environment, and that's why we have to promote all of that when we teach. Now, the other thing I was going to say with that, I'm just looking at the time, is do we need teachers say, there's a lot of them? Do we need to know all about them? No, you don't. And again, this relates to your passion. What are you passionate about? My research specializes in number 4, quality education. And if you look at that, you can see where everything that you would believe in around how do you teach for sustainability focuses on number 4, the goal number 4. So again, even if you just set that out in your narrative of how you move forward, is that you'll want to be a specialist in one specific target of quality education, the goal 4. That's enough, and just get to know your space, but do it for something that you love. If you're a beach person and you want to actually protect the oceans, then go hard on that and bring that into your teaching. So no matter what you're teaching, you can choose one or more things that you actually focus on, right? You don't need to understand everything. So my focus is on 4, 6, and 17, because 17 for me is a really big one. And that's what the SSN has done really well, that building partnerships. And again, so choose the topic that calls to you and really bring that into your everyday world. You don't need to do much bigger. You don't need to do a lot of research. As a teacher, you have the knowledge. It's just looking at how you can incorporate it. So one of the last things I'd like to actually talk about here is, when we think of sustainability education, a lot of people think that it's all about activities developed by experts. You bring it in, it's like, okay, I'm teaching this unit, what resources can I use? What activities can I use to sort of infuse sustainability education into the pre-existing unchanged curricula? That's the way we sort of think. So if we're going to unlearn and play with that a little bit, my thing would be the most powerful way to actually incorporate any type of sustainability education is just changing the way you see your curriculum, right? Just changing how you do it in a daily way. You don't need other resources. You don't need any other activities. It can be about asking strategic questions. It can be kids exploring things slightly, or an extra question to a worksheet that you've got. It could be a conversation that you have that's different. It could just be challenging an idea. Oh, that's interesting. Why do you think that? Where did you think you'd come to find that out? That's really what sustainability is. It's helping kids unlearn. So some of the things that we need to do, one of the things that we can do here is you bring yourself into the classroom. You're taught in faculties of education or schools of education that you don't really want to bring your passions or beliefs in there, because if you do, you're going to indoctrinate kids, or you're going to, you're going to be promoting your own agendas. Well, we're not supposed to do that. We're only supposed to promote the government's agenda of what we're being designed to teach. Rethinking, where can I play with that in ways that makes me a bit uncomfortable, but enough that I can live my own person. So again, if you love the beach, then ask questions that relate to every topic you teach. Can be related to something to do with the beach. Do that. You can find your passion. Mine, as Regina knows, is bats. I do a lot on bats. And so a lot of the examples I use when I teach stuff will relate to bats. And that's just the example I use. And so the kids I'm breaking the norm or the narrative around how they actually understand and treat and think about these amazing endangered species. So I'm retelling a different narrative or telling a different narrative. So again, a lot of what we should be doing here is just tweaking the way we think and the questions that we ask. We don't need to do anything more than that. And again, I really encourage you to link it to your everyday passion. So you're bringing more of yourself, your beliefs and things like that into the curriculum. Because people say I don't want to indoctrinate, as I said before. We are. That's what education is. It's an indoctrination. And right now we're indoctrinating for unsustainability. So if we're going to indoctrinate anyway, how can we ask kids questions so we can actually get them to actually think about the path towards sustainability? And again, this is an evolving path. It's more about asking the questions. We don't know the answers. It's about redirecting the questions and getting them to think through it. Because if they can do that now, then they're the skills that they're going to have as future citizens to rethink things and to actually ask different questions, right? Not the normal questions that we usually teach them. So bold questions are a big thing. And living in discomfort. The kids will want to know more. They want the fairy tale ending. They want to know the end because that's the way they've learned. We've got to try and get them to be comfortable with, we don't know yet, but how do we talk about it? How can we think about this so it's differently? So it's the questions we ask, the way we think about it. It's not the end goal. It's the process with sustainability that's the key thing. So ultimately, the thing that I've found that I've noticed that works best for me is that, you don't need to know a lot of big things about sustainability, right? What you need to do is, again, if you can model how to actually engage students in linking to the environment. I'll show you a slide that and the next slide is actually a quote that I've got from a book that I'm just writing right now. And it's talking about how do we get kids to save something if they don't feel connected to it? You're not going to save something if you don't value it. You're not going to save something if you don't love something. You're not going to have any, you won't, if you don't feel connected to it, if it's not part of your people, then you're not really going to do anything with it. So we've got to actually get kids to connect with it. So it's not a knowing, a headspace knowing, it's an embodied feeling. Now, a lot of kids don't really know how to feel connected. We see that with the mental health issues, especially in adolescence nowadays. What is it? 1 in 7 kids have been diagnosed with mental health issues in schools. That's huge, 1 in 7, right, diagnosed. And so if we're looking at this, one of the first things I would say is, in your day when you teach, in your own special, unique way, try and do 3 things that will actually show, first of all, kindness to yourself. How do you actually show forgiveness, gentleness, kindness, and compassion to yourself as a teacher as you go through your day? Because if you don't know how to do that, then you won't actually have built those neural networks that allow that to actually be your first response to kids or to anything else. And this is really hard. I grew up with a father who, everything was wrong. He was pretty strict on everything. And so I didn't have a lot of those forgiveness for myself or compassion for myself type thing. I wasn't my own best friend, as they say. And so having to rewire by actually stopping and saying, what do I need? If I was my best friend right now, what advice would she give me? How can I move forward? That's a key thing in sustainability. It might not seem much, but if we got every person in the world to actually have learn what compassion, kindness, and forgiveness and all those type of things are, then it would change the world, right? And again, I know that this is a very sort of very idealistic, and there's big infrastructural things, but we can't do that in a classroom per se. We can, but we don't have time in the next 5 minutes. But what we can do is look at what 3 things can you do during your day that can help and that can show compassion, gentleness, kindness, forgiveness to another person, especially your students. How can you have conversations with them to talk about unlearning some of the things that they do? So again, I was talking to somebody this morning. They were saying that they rang up somebody, and it was a system thing, and the person who was speaking and giving them advice was rude. Right? They were rude to them, and they were sort of saying, dismissing them and not actually showing them any more kindness, gentleness, things like that. We've all been on the phone. Hello, Telstra. And again, it's one of those things that it's, wouldn't it be great if we were all the best person we could possibly be? And again, the first way it comes down to the neural networks being built is to do that for ourselves. And then how do we, even when we're in our most cranky pants mode, when the students are just driving us crazy, how can we stop and even choose 3 people that day, right? It's like, sorry, dude, that's not your day today. Not your time today. Maybe tomorrow you'll have a lucky day. You're going to be with one of the ones that I disappoint today, but maybe next day. But, you know, so how do we actually do that? So find 3 things every day that you can do to actually even just smile at a stranger to help somebody else. The next one is, what 3 things can you do for the more than human world? So whether it's a plant or animal, to show compassion, whether it's to advocate for them, whether it's to sort of, you know, the kid who's picking the leaf to say, hey, why'd you do that? Let me tell you about what the leaf is, or let's think about that. In what way are you connected to that leaf? What does that leaf do for you? It's about, in your own way, your own unique way, finding some way of connecting people with some type of animal. Don't kill the spider. Tell the kids why they should be not afraid of spiders, or whatever it is you want to talk about. Then the ecosystem. What 3 things can you do every day? Whether it's seeing a bag, you know, some rubbish, you pick up 3 things of rubbish in a day, you're done. If we got every kid to do 3 things in any of these 4 categories, it would make a huge deal of difference. And compassion, kindness, connectedness are the key things for sustainability. It's not about an activity. The basis of all the activities is to try and promote this interconnection with the more than human world, right? And so if we can do those things in your everyday practice, in your own unique way, that is really what the key to sustainability is. And again, I know that there's bigger issues here, but if everybody did that in the world, it would make a difference. I'm going to sort of just let you have a look at what I've written here as about schooling and care and the ethics of care and how it relates to sustainability. And hopefully I've got a few moments for questions.
I was going to say, we've got a few moments for questions before people need to run back off to classes, those that do. Some might be able to stay for a couple of minutes extra if you can too, Ali. But does anyone want to ask some questions of Ali today?
And that was a lot of talking, so thank you so much for listening to that. Do you think it's possible?
Oh, you've got to hope it is, don't you? Feel free to unmute yourself and have a bit of a conversation, or put your hand up for questions, whichever way works well for you. But I feel like today, Ali, that was your compassion for others moment, is sharing all of that with us. So thank you so much.
I think the key thing too is that sustainability, there's so many big problems out there. How do you go to address them? Well, my understanding is you can't do the big picture stuff right now. You bring it back to what you can do on an everyday basis. You take the core of what we need to do, a big picture, and you live it every day, right? Be the change, as everybody says. And, you know, if you can be the change, that's your contribution to sustainability. Absolutely. Protesting, doing big changes, things like that, absolutely. But it still comes down to, how do we show connection? How do we show connection to everybody? How do we get kids to actually feel that they actually relate to an animal or to a plant, that they actually love it enough to want to save it?
There's a few in the chat, Ali. Any class lessons suggested to assist with getting students to connect?
Again, it's connecting first of all to themselves, because a lot of the time the kids, the reason why they're not connected is they're not connected to themselves, you know, and that's a really hard thing. And so we can model that and cultivate that in schools by, you know, even if it's just you're teaching their everyday stuff and you stop, how are you going? You seem a little bit tired today, or, you know, what are you feeling? What are you thinking? You know, those type of gentle questions that we ask, that we consider good pedagogy. It's just taking that moment and even being vulnerable in yourself in the classroom. I mean, I know even now when I teach, I've been teaching for 30 years, it's like a long time. It is. You know, there will be times when I'll say to the kids, you've got to be really gentle with me today. Can everybody be gentle with me today? I'm having a really hard day. I just need a bit of gentleness today. And it doesn't matter whether they're grade 1s or even university students, they understand that. And then I'll say to them, you know, when you're having a hard day, I'm modeling it. You come up to me and tell me I'm having a hard day. Can you just be a bit gentle? Or could you give me a bit, cut me a bit of slack? And things like that, the kids start to connect with who they are and what they need and how they can show compassion to themselves. And then you have conversations. Okay, well, you're fighting with this person, or this is going on in the classroom, or you're talking over this person, and help them to connect with the needs of other people. And then again, connect with a plant or an animal, and connect with something outside. Some really good examples is when you're telling a story, like, if you're reading to kids a story, take them outside. This is what this book is about. Take them outside and just get them to sit under a tree. If you're reading about a bird, then get them to think about the bird, look at a bird in the tree. How do they see the world? What's their vantage point? What are they thinking? What are they feeling? Getting them to have an understanding that that bird has thoughts and feelings and eats food and all those type of things. So again, it's a really interesting idea just to get them to sort of reach out and connect and see themselves in the other. Okay, what have we got here? Start thinking each morning. Perfect.
I was gonna add to that as well, Ali. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Ed.
In trying to fit things in that are already in our day and just changing the way they work. I love the morning roll time now, in that we connect with each other in our class by role tagging. So rather than me saying good morning to everyone, which becomes a monotonous thing that kids are sort of switched off from, they tag someone else, or we sort of just go in alphabetical order to keep it simple, but it's just a simple good morning and I hope you have a nice day. And I model that kind of early on, but just that basic connection to person, and then teaching the response of thanks, you too, good morning to such and such. And I really like, someone else popped in about, like then how to connect that with nature. Like, I really appreciate the way that like on a Friday we do a compliments day. I really appreciate the way you do this. And it just gave me a great idea of, I really appreciate this in nature, right? And just starting to verbalize in that morning roll time, because everyone gets their moment to share, but it's usually here, present. It's only 2 more words to say, I'm having a great day, hope you do as well. So I love that one. That's really, I think it builds that social connection in your room pretty naturally. You see it over a couple of weeks.
Oh, absolutely. And that's fantastic. And really, if you were going to extend it, you could sort of say, okay, who's got a plant, or find out who's got an animal plant at home, or as they walk to school, they could actually sort of say, there could be somebody that says there's a beautiful flower, right, outside. Tell me about that flower. What do you and the flower have in common? Look at that. You both rely on the sun. You can talk about how it's got a transpiratory system, or it could be just the fact that it's sort of, how it makes you feel, that type of thing, or just somehow some type of connecting. It's like, really go home and study your dog and sort of say, is it just something you own? Is it a pet? Or do you actually see any type of emotion when you say hello to your dog and whatever? Do you see any type of connection back? Do you think it's saying hello to you? Do you think it's, and again, get them to bring that in, and then sort of also look at the sky and sort of, what is it that you and the sky have in common? Well, air. It moves the air around that allows you to breathe. It could be anything like that. So it's just, again, it's tweaking it a little bit, and because what you're doing is perfect. And if you wanted to, it's only with whatever you feel comfortable doing and the kids feel comfortable doing, to talk about, it's extending that connection so they can actually see that whatever the other is also part of self, if that makes sense.
Ali, I know I'm probably not the person who should be asking questions, but I'm a bit fascinated. Regina made a comment about sharing these ideas with the positive culture and positive behaviour learning committees. And, I'm fascinated in schools by the fact we separate these things. So we do have environmental committees, and we have the social committees, or the positive behavioural wellness committees or groups. And I guess I see it all as sustainability. I just don't know in a school environment how you make that change in understanding, or I don't know if it's a terminology thing or practice, so that it's a bit more integrated and united rather than so separate all the time. Any thoughts?
Even what Ed's saying, I mean, it's good pedagogy. I mean, that's beautiful pedagogy. I mean, it's simple. It's just tweaking what we do. And that really is sustainability. It's not a resource. It's not something big. It's how you actually see your kids, how you treat your kids, how you get them to understand that the only way that we can actually live together on this planet is if we're all connected and we actually all really try to understand stuff from the other's perspective, whether it's the tree or whether it's, you know, it's that whole, all my relations. We are all interconnected, we are all related, and we've been mandated and taught that we don't show that connection, right? So it's just, whether it's just connection to you know, the people in the classroom, as Ed did, you know, it's all fantastic. Anyway, I know everybody's going. I really want to thank everybody for coming. I hope that gave you a little bit of a lunchtime bite. And yes, and thank you so much. And thank you for everybody saying different things. So thank you. And Erin, I hope you have a fantastic time out there on your field trip.
Yeah, it was great to tune in from there. Yeah, thank you, Ali. Round of applause.